gotta go fast. You're watching full screen boss fight.
Hi. So now I have a reason to post the yellow paint video that I did a couple years ago. And that's going to be my Throwback Thursday for this week. But Final Fantasy VII Remake director doubles down on yellow paint. There is definitely a need for that type of thing. Now, my feelings on this are very strong, mainly because when you understand the reasons why they do stuff like this, or why they're actually adding the yellow paint as an option, you kind of look at it and you're like, damn, they're really insulting the shit out of my intelligence here. And I'm not lying. So there was a GDC conference a few years back where they were talking about the whole concept of adding things like yellow paint and making it so that a lot of the direction of where things are and how to progress in a game are blatant to the player. And as an example of why they need to do this, they showed a bunch of Dark Side Phil videos of Phil basically being a fucking numbnut and just bullshitting his way through games while making up excuses for him not being able to do stuff. I feel like most of that shit's it's half act and half like he's basically doing this mainly to keep engagement on his Twitch channel or wherever it is he streams now. Now, they're basing your interactions in the game off of his interactions on the stream, which is the most wrong-headed thing you could possibly do, because it just kind of it makes it worse for everybody. There are intuitive ways for you to actually do stuff like this. There's intuitive ways to make directions interesting or whatever. Or you could have enemy placement there, like Metroid, where proper enemy placement like led you to find out that some of the blocks can disappear if you hit them, which leads to secret areas. You could also have, say, if there was a rock face, you want somebody to know that the rock face is climbable. You could have enemies climb down the rock face. You could have enemies climb down the ladder, like in Double Dragon. There's ways you can do this without coming off like an overprotective mother. Bubble wrapping the shit out of your player and hand holding them through the entire experience. But unfortunately, because one guy is being a dumbass, maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not. Now you have the entire industry believing that the rest of us are all fucking dumbasses. And that's why I'm like, I really don't like this at all. Like, you can put the yellow paint there and basically write a note next to it that says "Here, retard," and have the same effect. So let's get into this article. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi is once again championing the infamous yellow paint to guide players, saying this is definitely needed. Using yellow paint on ledges and walls to indicate a traversable area in a video game has been a hot topic amongst players ever since its rise in popularity in the likes of Uncharted on PlayStation 3. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth uses this tactic as well, with players sharing their thoughts on it, leaving Hamaguchi himself surprised about the debate it stirred at the time. In a new interview with Games Radar Plus, Hamaguchi said that he understood that there are some people who don't want or need the yellow paint, but insisted that it was necessary. Again, this is the it's for your own good mentality. Or there are some people out there that don't understand how this is used, and therefore you have to cater to those people. You don't have to handhold them or whatever. There is a natural way of doing these things. I get that there's a debate about that, whether that fits with the world or not, whether some people want it or not. Hamaguchi said, I think as a game, there is definitely a need for that kind of thing in a lot of ways. I think obviously different developers experiment, try different things about what works best, what fits best, the right way of doing things in their game. The need to guide players around from a gameplay perspective and show them what can be done, what they need to do. There are definitely times where that is needed, he added. So I think obviously there is more of a debate about how it's done and what level that works. And if there's still people who say, no, that doesn't fit at all, we don't like that, that's fine. But I think there's definitely a need there, and it's something that is definitely worth looking at. When you think of the origins of why things like this is done and the stuff that I explained to you at the top of the video, I feel like this also opens up another discussion that needs to be had on the concept of, if you were putting these things out constantly and then you're your audience basically gets so comfortable with this idea that they can't actually use their eyes or use their observational skills in order to find out where stuff is in certain aspects, you're creating a dependency issue. And that's going to be something that is probably going to be detrimental to the player in future games. Now, that also opens up the idea that yes, we can toggle those things off if we wanted to. You probably could set a toggle and make it work. But at the same time, instead of creating these instances, especially in these particular images here, these ledges look like they should have been climbed. Going off of games like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, if something looks like it's climbable, I usually go for it that way. That's a common sense thing. That's not really so much of a, I need somebody to tell me that this is jumpable or whatever. It's just laid out there, and then you just go through trial and error, whether it works or not. But that's something that's part of the wider conversation on this. And I'm not going to say this is either or good or bad, but my personal feelings on this, I feel like you should, as a gamer, you should probably have the observational skills to be able to look and see where things are. Now, there are times where I got stuck in games. Like I got stuck in Half-Life because I didn't know what direction to go in. I think it was like the second or third area when you had the head crabs that came out of the vents and you're trying to figure out where to go. I got stuck in that area. And that's one of those things where it's like, okay, maybe it's not so blatant. Maybe you do need to like address a guide or something like that to figure out where exactly you need to go next. But you shouldn't have to make it so garishly visible. And I think yellow paint is garish. It's quite garish. When the yellow paint debate kicked off with Rebirth last year, some said they didn't like how in your face and hand holding it was, not just in Final Fantasy VII Remake, but in modern video games. Others have pointed out how it could be helpful and was an important accessibility feature. Developers too weighed in with some highlighting how the player tests and focus group players sometimes struggle to work out where to go, get frustrated, quit playing altogether. Because of this, somewhat obvious and sometimes unrealistic visual cues are needed to help point players in the right direction. And some have pointed out that the video games feature visual cues for exploration and progression for decades now. Now, the problem is when you're looking at older games as an example, usually they have like subtle clues to them. Like say there'll be some lighting or whatever in a game where you have like basically a street light or whatever that actually is shown on the area that needs to be progressed or the ladder that you need to go up. Those are done in a subtle way that actually like it kind of is a wink and a nod action. Placing yellow paint on there is blatant and just kind of, again, it's insulting your intelligence and making you feel like you here, stupid. Go up this way, dumbass. Go up the ladder, stupid. Climb up the fucking rock face, you stupid piece of shit. Like, basically, that's how it feels. And like, well, trying to champion stuff like that and then say that it's good for the player. No, from the language that we're getting from developer to consumer, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like you are completely just like tearing this person apart. Like a similar thing, I guess you could say, is the arrow in beat 'em ups, whatever. When there's the double dragon arrow, and you're like, I'm going. Like there's that level of that, but that's also that's just a keep moving thing or whatever. That's something that pops up every once in a while when you're not moving fast enough. But yeah, it's not like it's so insulting as just sitting there or just being out in the open or whatever. Or like the Resident Evil 4 remake where, oh, there's yellow paints all over these boxes. That means they're breakable. You're supposed to be trying everything anyways to figure out what's breakable and what isn't. That's just standard like gaming 101. Like check every box and every destructible item to make sure there's not like additional ammo and weapons and power-ups in them. Based off of Hamaguchi's comments, perhaps fans can expect the yellow paint to return for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. Speaking of which, Square Enix said last year that the goal was to see the finale launched by 2027. I think, honestly, I have not been interested in this game whatsoever. Ever since I played the demo, I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's going in a different direction than the original. But I really just don't care that much for it. But there's another thing that's going on with this that I just want you guys to to notice here. So before we started here, we're talking a little bit about the creators behind the original game. So let's briefly talk about the original. What's the attitude working on the remake series in terms of referencing old planning documents and the like from back in the day? Are you looking at stuff and thinking about reviving old ideas or just reference? Or indeed, how much of that stuff even still exists? I know back then material preservation wasn't exactly a priority. Hamaguchi states, I mean, you probably expect this knowing as you do about game development. Back then, we are talking about mid-90s. There's almost no documentation left over from that period at all, practically none. Game development back then was a lot more Wild West. A lot of material was not just kept. Data management wasn't even done to modern standards. So yeah, there's basically nothing. There's some character design sketches, and I think we've got, and obviously anything that was published separately. So Ultimania guides have a few of the original documents in there, but in terms of stuff like, for example, partway through development of written documents, design documents, etc., yeah, there's practically nothing to work on. So that led into a whole argument on the internet because people found out about that, and this was also flying in the face of basically saying that, yeah, you should probably skip the original and get first impression for the remakes, because there's a lot of people that, again, this is another remake discussion. Instead of playing the originals, you should focus on the remakes because the remake's better. I disagree. I think the Final Fantasy remake is a bunch of convoluted bullshit, and I really don't want to put my hands on that. But it's funny that the characters, Tifa Lockhart has words of encouragement and frustration from Barrett and Cloud Strife as they climb the stairs of the Shinra building. Would you stop acting like a retard and climb? Yes, I should play the remake, which I really don't have any interest in, and I should just ignore the fact that the original exists. Again, that mentality that exists. This is a whole mess, mind you. Now, getting back to that design document thing. Dungeon 00X says they had them on hand when the Ultimania archive was placed. And he did state that the Ultimania archive has a few, but not all of them. It's not all gone, I suppose. This post on my timeline reminded me that a friend of mine years ago sent me this asking to voice my thoughts on its origin. I believe it to be possibly from Final Fantasy VII. And that's the... If that's the case, these might be, well, I mean, that is Midgar's layout, the large floating pizza. That's interesting that they're originally, if that's Midgar, they're originally going to call it Sodom, a la Sodom and Gomorrah. They would actively delete the data after completing production. All those beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds are beautiful 3D models that they deleted. If they had kept it, we'd be able to get the most gorgeous remasters instead of what we have now. Yeah, and the main reason why they do stuff like that is because they don't want to, they don't have the space. It's kind of like back in the day when people would like basically erase tapes after filming shows and use the tapes to film other stuff on top of it before people understood the concept of preservation. Square lost the source code for Trials of Mana, but because Nintendo manufactured all the cartridges for third-party developers in the 90s, they still had the source code for Whereas games, maybe because Nintendo actually had proper order on even in the 90s. This is why Collection of Mana is a Nintendo Switch exclusive and the only way to play the official English version of Trials of Mana. I mean, going off of the 80s, Nintendo was very big on setting standards and trying to maintain the standards and sets of quality. This is why they were kind of authoritarian in how they handled things back in the 80s and 90s with the NES and how the NES was being ran, trying to reduce the amount of shovelware and slop that actually existed by limiting a lot of these companies to 5 releases a year, or 5, it might have been 5 or 7 releases, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was like a certain number of releases, and it forced Konami to create shell companies like Ultra Games in order to circumvent that. It's wild because at the time people were like, Nintendo is a bunch of bullies and blah blah blah, but if you look at all the stuff that they actually accomplished and the things that we have because of that, it was kind of a necessary evil, which is why I call Nintendo, I jokingly refer to Nintendo as lawful evil. they may be considered monsters by some, but there is a method to their madness, and it is much needed in this crazy world that we exist in. I do call them the Kathleen Kennedy of Japan. We have nothing to pull from. Bro matters with only the game can get it right. But yeah, this is a whole mess of shit. Now the yellow paint thing really irritates me, and the we don't have the design documents thing irritates me. But the thing that irritates me the most is basically the please, you should do your due diligence and play the remakes before playing the originals, because they're two separate games. Now, I noticed that I did state a couple of videos ago that remakes and remasters should justify their own existence. But I feel like in the case of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it is such a convoluted mess of a game that it takes itself way too seriously that I'm not feeling it. There are people that are interested in this game. God bless you. If that's what you like, that's fine. But I love Final Fantasy VII Vanilla. I own the original PlayStation. I pre-ordered the original PlayStation version, and I got the Cloud Strife t-shirt that came with it when I went to Software Etc. to pre-order it. And I actually wound up getting the game again on the Nintendo Switch. And that was something that I plan on. I want to play that with my kids once they get to the point where their attention spans are actually worth a damn to be able to sit through that. So I don't know. All the people in the comments have somehow concluded they're therefore unfamiliar with the original game. We've known this for decades. Any ports of Final Fantasy VII have been from the PC version, which are easy to extract files and have higher resolution images and sound, even included unused maps and scripts. Like I said, if you're interested in playing that, then God bless you. But I'm not going to put myself through playing this, whatever. People are slowly kind of looking at this and saying, I don't know if I really want to go through this shit anymore. After going through the second game and just all the messes, all unresolved conflicts, and just kind of cock teasery that's been going on with this. But anyways, I'm out of here. Thank you for joining for this. I'll see you next boss fight. Take care.